Hey buddy, in this video I'm going to try to summarize Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. These books are massive. This are my leather-bound editions that they broke into 2 volumes because of how huge they are. Cat, you can't see him. He's here. Can't have a video summary without a cat. Alright. This is my first time reading it in the leather-bound editions because they're so massive. The last couple times I've read them, I've gone through an audiobook. I can do while I'm doing other things, and like running and like doing chores. So that's a lot better. Oh, this is bad. You can't see the cat. That's so cute. Anyway, going through the leatherbound was very enjoyable because they are beautiful, beautiful editions. Let me get all the cat hair off my hands. So you got the foiling, you got the book ribbon, but what I really enjoyed was the full color art and illustrations. There's a lot of things I miss out on going through audiobook. These were added, but just in general, just having maps and diagrams and all the way through, there's some really nice, this is the character art, every character having their own icon and symbology, and the different heralds listed on the top of the chapter marks. But just beautiful art, and I'm trying to find some of Shallan's artwork. There's a lot of things they added not even in the regular editions, not even in the leatherbound, that I kind of forgotten about and was missing going through an audio. If you do go through an audio, they do have all the illustrations as PDFs you can like flip through. Especially all of Brandon Sanderson's art, maps, drawings are always done in universe by a character, but with Shallan being one of the main characters and an artist, I think it really lends itself extra to like having all of her drawings and illustrations of portraits or natural art and the creatures. It really just adds a lot of depth to the world. You also have a lot of Navani's like diagrams and sketches on how fabrials work. Maybe you get more of those in Words of Radiance. I'm kind of struggling. But in general, it was a beautiful, beautiful copy, and I really enjoyed going through physically again. I think I did the first time, but my last couple of times after that were audio. And as I just take notes, and there's a lot of emphasis he puts on his words, capital letters, stuff like that, to draw specific attention to things that is kind of missed by me when I go through an audio. Anyway, The Way of Kings is book 1 of a 5-part series in the Stormlight Archive. This obviously will have spoilers for Way of Kings, and this is also from the perspective of someone who is current and to prepare for book 5, Wind and Truth, coming out in December. So this will also contain perspective spoilers for the later books. I won't be covering the later books in this video, but there's a lot of that is buried in here without that context. And when you go through again, you're like, oh, this is this character, this means this. And I may or may not, I probably will be covering that stuff as I go through. So this will have a spoiler for the entire series, not just Way of Kings. So there are 3 primary characters in Way of Kings, with a lot of secondary characters and a lot of interlude perspectives. The 3 primary characters covered in this book are Kaladin, Dalinar, and Shallan. Those are the primary viewpoint characters. You also do get a bunch of Adolin, so I think you do kind of mix Adolin and Dalinar in some of the chapters. But primarily, the book is broken up into 5 parts, and it shifts character views throughout. So also kind of tricky to do summaries on. But we'll start with Kaladin. Each book in the Stormlight Archive focuses on a single character primarily, with most of the flashback chapters relating to the background of that character. And this book is Kaladin, one of my personal favorites, and very beloved, one of the best done characters. But it is his book, so you definitely do get some very good insight into him, as we start with his life as a slave inside a wagon being hauled out to the Shattered Plains. The Shattered Plains being a wasteland where all the kingdoms of the Alethi from Alakar, the Alethi princedoms are in a 6-year siege against the Parshendi for the murder of their king, Gavilar, on the day of the signing of peace treaty of cooperation with their kingdom. And so this is the first flashback prologue. Yeah, not the first prologue. This book has several prologues. But the prologue, the prelude, the prologue, is from the perspective of Sazeth. He is a Shin assassin with one of the honor blades that gives him the power over 2 surges, the surges of the Order of Windrunners, gravity and adhesion, cohesion, several of those that seem very similar. But he can bind things together. He can also change gravity. And it's his intro, and that gives us a very good perspective of one of the primary magic systems in this book, which is surge binding. Every order of the Knights Radiant having access to 2 surges. And Seth has been trained in this art of using this blade, which gives him these abilities. And he has a very kind of technical, scholarly process of it. So it's very good for the reader as he goes through his skills. You kind of get a technical breakdown, which is kind of Sanderson's bread and butter, of having a magic system that is almost like a science, and it's very well explained. You can really understand what he's going to do, what he can do with this. And that's a very good setup for what type of abilities are out there, and it's also very good kind of foreshadowing because of Kaladin and following in his footsteps as being a true Windrunner. There's a lot of hints as Kaladin is going through this book and begins on his journey and path of what he can do, what he's actually doing, because you have a very good example through Sazeth. So that is the prologue, the second prologue. The first prologue, the prelude, being there are thousands of years of desolations where the Voidbringers are wiping out humanity, and they almost do it. And so after these battles are won, humanity is left without like culture, technology, sciences. Their numbers are greatly reduced. You have a lot of poverty and famine, and society almost has to like restart. And we have this perspective of these heralds, these men with great power, and these honor blades that are sent back to fight and train men and of society just to fight these Voidbringers. And they say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. Like, we're being tortured and it's hell on us. That we are going to stop, and we're just going to tell people we won, and we're going to hide. We're not going to return back to damnation to continue the cycle of fighting these creatures. One of their order, Talanat, did fall, and they say, hey, he's enough. He'll just uphold the Oath Pact on his own. The Oath Pact being they trap all the spirits of the Voidbringers in damnation, and until they are trapped that are with them. And the Voidbringers say, hey, we can torture you until you decide to let us through. And that starts the whole cycle over again. And, you know, thousands of millennia of being tortured and killed again and again and again. These people are starting to crack. The heralds are not doing too well. So they leave one of their order. They abandon their honor blades and a ring in the stone, and they kind of disappear. And then we jump 4,000 years later. Talanat has held all the Voidbringers back at bay, which is super impressive. This is not going to be a fast video. I am so sorry. We are 10 minutes in, and we're on the prologue. So, Kaladin, his journey as being a slave. We start to get flashbacks of him, how he was raised as a surgeon's apprentice to his father, and he was very educated. He's a very bright boy. He is dark-eyed, which is the kind of worker caste, but they are the upper tier, son of a surgeon, very well educated, not kind of farmers or laborers. So he lives a pretty wealthy life, and his family wanted him to marry into a lower Light Eyes family and become a surgeon and kind of continue that tradition. And he has wanted to fight and be a soldier. They got a new High Lord, Town Lord, in that kind of really hated his father, and he was just a very bitter and petty man. And so he made life very difficult. His father had stolen like a bunch of spears to try to pay for Kaladin's education. There was some accidents in the town, and the town lord's son died, and they tried to save him, but they couldn't as surgeons. So there's a lot of bad blood, and during a recruitment, Kaladin's little brother gets sent to war. He gets drafted, and so Kaladin joins as well to kind of protect him, and he couldn't. His brother is used as bait very callously, and Kaladin, he dies in Kaladin's arms, and Kaladin can't save him, which really breaks Kaladin. He feels like he has to protect all these other youths that remind him of his brother, so he becomes a squad leader. He throws himself into his training. He uses kind of all his money and time to really protect his squad, and he has one of the best spearman squads in the army. Until one day, a shard bearer, it's a rogue shard bearer, comes in his little backwater, little squabble, and mows down his entire squad, a lot of the army. Kaladin rushes after him, and he fights the shard bearer with a spear. He manages to throw a throwing knife right into the guy's eye plate and kills the shard bearer. And by tradition, he then wins the shards, the armor, and the blade. But he is shell-shocked and just no, I don't want this grim murder weapon that killed all my friends and the people and these kids, all these people that I was trying to protect. It's just a gruesome reminder of his failure and his loss. So he turns it down, and then his Bright Lord Amaran, who is the general of his army, says Kaladin gives it to one of his men. You guys take it. He's the second best fighter. I really can't wear this. And Amaran says, well, no, I deserve it because I'm the best. Who deserves this power is the person who can do the most with it. The ends justify the means. You'll suffer now, but I deserve this. I can do the most good with this armor and weapon. So he kills all of Kaladin's soldiers, the surviving ones. They're wounded. Kaladin's wounded and exhausted. And he says, hey, since you say my lie, I'll be merciful to you and I won't kill you. I will enslave you instead, because that's so much better. So Cal gets slave brands. He gets thrown into a life of slavery. He's a fighter, and he fights, and he escapes, and he escapes, and he escapes. And he leads slave results until eventually he's branded with the Shash brand, which is he's a dangerous slave. And he's sent out to the Shattered Plains, just being hey, get out of here. We're going to send you out to die in this war because you're just too dangerous to do any kind of work. And he is very depressed and beaten down. And that's where we pick up with him in this cart. Obviously, read the books. It's so much better to get these reveals slowly in the backstory. But you've read this. This is just a little recap to get you ready for the rest of the series and book 5. He arrives at the Shattered Plains and gets thrown in what they call bridge crews. Bridge crews being expendable slave labor, either murderers, people who really messed up in the army, that they used to be soldiers, or just a lot of people in poverty or foreigners, people who committed some kind of crime or infraction, and they're thrown into disposable labor bridge crews, which are used for bait to mainly pick up these bridges to carry across these chasms as the Alethi fight their battle against the Bashindi in the Shattered Plains. There's a bunch of plateaus, and High Lord Sadeas uses bridge crews because they're very cheap, they're very fast, and he also uses them as bait for his soldiers. So Kaladin is kind of thrown in this bridge crew, and just kind of through luck, he survives, and he is kind of saying what am I doing here? He's very depressed, suicidal, and he's just tired of failing to save people. That his brother, his crew, as a spearman, he was a squad leader, his entire crew slaughtered, both in the battle and then by Amaran, and then he couldn't save all those slaves. Every time he had tried, they ended up captured or killed, and he again and again and again is the lone survivor out of all these people. And he's every time I try to help people, it ends up going poorly, and I'm kind of cursed. I can't save these people. And so he walks through this chasm and he's going to jump in and say it's not worth it. And one of the Spren, spirits of the cognitive realm, these living personifications of ideas, those high Spren and low Spren being like emotion Spren or elemental Spren, fear, shame, fire, wind. And then you have high Spren, which are ideals, and they're a little bit more intelligent, which is like honor and cultivation Spren, stuff like that. And so he has a Spren that he's been talking to that only he can see. And she's like, hey, if you're just gonna like give up, if you have nothing to lose, then you have anything to lose, to try one more time. So he says, fine, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna save these bridge crew because I can't do any more harm to them. They're about to perish. Every day, just randomly, they can get killed by arrows as they are just carrying these bridges without armor or shields. And he's like, I will try. So he goes to one of the squadron sergeant of the bridge crews and says, hey, I'm the leader of Bridge 4 now. Like, I'm in charge. The guy's like, no. And Kaladin, as a trained soldier, just like takes this guy down. And it's like, I got nothing to lose. Like, I'm basically running it up. Like, I'll make your life miserable. Like, I'll kill you. Make me the bridge crew leader, and I will, like, give you some money. So, carrot stick right there. And the guy's like, whatever, get off me. So he takes his lead in the front of the bridge, and he trades the spot of a name named Rock, this big, large horn-eater guy who's one of my favorites. And during that bridge crew, there's like everyone else in that front row dies except Kaladin. And Rock is like, I would have died if I was up there. So he's like, hey, I'm with you. Like, you're my boy. And all around Kaladin's hands are arrows. Like, I missed his face, but when his hands were like inside the wood bar and holding it, you could see all these arrows, like tons of them, just bunched up all around him. Like so close to like ending him. And so he's very lucky, right? And he starts doing a couple things, which is a fantastic journey of just improvisation and strategy and cleverness and just wit, that he starts doing medicine of the wounded. He starts dragging them out. He starts doing like stretches. Like, some people are so exhausted, they're just living day to day. They're not planning. So he's like, hey, we have to do better. The reason these are so exhausting to us is because we do nothing all week and then we just kill ourselves in these bridge runs. So he starts exercising and practicing running a bridge. He starts stretching and hydrating and doing things. And they kind of organize a crew. And Rock's the first one to join. And then some of the wounded, he says, start to join. These are men that are just gone. And they are not talking to anyone. They're not social. There's no point of being social or being real humans because they say that think their lives are over. And so slowly, one by one, Kaladin is able to like, hey, organize medical supplies and organize like water crews, and they start training and getting better. And then the wounded they're carrying back instead of leaving them to die, and they can kind of swell their numbers a little bit, but then they have to pay for it. So Kaladin starts a couple schemes to get money. One of them is he is again medically trained. He starts collecting when they're doing manual labor, lifting rocks. That they are able to gather different plants to use as medicine and start selling those and using those to buy like gauze and other medical stuff and keep some of the antiseptic for themselves. We are introduced to several important bridgemen. You've got Sigil, who is a Aegis man who is, they're very scholarly, so he is trained as a scholar. He has a very good head for numbers. He was also trained by Wit as his apprentice, as a world singer to tell of other tribes and cultures and people, and just expand people's like view of the world and trust and accept people more, and to celebrate their differences and everything like that. And so he is a very cultured person that speaks several languages and is good with figures, and he's a very scientific mind. And then you have Taft, who's a former sergeant, who's very just kind of, again, just grizzled, and most people kind of given up. You have Moash, who's also a big guy, one of the best kind of potential soldier builds. You also have Rock, giant guy. Pacifist becomes a cook. Horn-eater guy, love Rock. And then you have Lopin, a one-armed Herdazian man, who is just a beautiful nut job. You know, he is positive and he's uplifting and he's always cracking jokes, and he's the only person that seems like he is actually fine with being there, and he joins Bridge 4 willingly, and he's just such a delight. So together with Rock and Taft, they start organizing the bridge crews. They start using the surplus money to buy meals to give people extra nutrition, and also a bonding by a nightly fire, having a big stew, and Rock cooks this big meal. And the people start to like kind of wake up, and they start to socialize and talk about their names and their past, and they start to become like a community and become human again, which really annoys everyone else. Kaladin is breaking all these rules, and he's so they're really putting Bridge 4 out like, hey, this guy's a problem, we got to get him killed, but we can't execute him because he didn't do anything wrong. So they just give him more and more bridge runs and worse duty. And one of the things he does, he notices that the Parshendi don't move their dead. They get really irate if you kick or move the bodies around. So he starts taking a lot of the armor from them and uses that as a armor and then a shield. And so they fire arrows at him and they leave his bridge crew alone. And he's fast and he's dancing and he starts investing a little bit. So he's moving faster through Stormlight without really realizing it. And he's able to absorb or draw all this arrow attention to him and save his bridge crews. One of the things he does is he turns the bridge on his side, uses the bridge as a shield, and they practice it because they're the only ones practicing. But and it works. But then all the Parshendi arrowmen start targeting the other bridge crews because like they're easier targets. And so those bridge crews try to turn their bridges on the side, but they didn't practice it, so the bridges fall. Anyway, it's a slaughter. Some of the bridges get set, but not all of them. So some of the Sidious' soldiers get out on the plateau, but they don't have proper reinforcements and set up, and the bridge crews get slaughtered, and the army gets slaughtered around, and they lost. And so Kaladin, by trying to save his 40 men, causes all the other bridge crews to get hit, and then the leader, the Light Eyes, in charge of the bridge crews, gets executed, and Kaladin has to be made an example to. So they lash him up to the outside of the barracks during a high storm. And the high storms are one of the beautiful environmental things of Roshar that really defines this entire planet. Every 7 to 15 days, a big storm rolls from east to west, always in the same direction. It is a thunderstorm mixed with a tornado, mixed with a monsoon. And it's just sheets of water, wind that can rip up boulders, lightning everywhere, like tempest, huge amounts of wind, and it'll just blow you apart. There's massive flooding and erosion, and it shapes this entire land. That all the plants and creatures can withdraw into their shells, withdraw into the ground, adapt. You have to be in cover, be underground. All the towns and cities are in lakes, something kind of shelter or some kind of cove or ridge, a chasm to kind of protect you from the wind and the rain. And that is where all these towns are kind of built in, these kind of storm shelter kind of mentality. So he's lashed out there. Was it's a death sentence, but it's we're not executing you. We're leaving it to the judgment of the Stormfather. And Taft's kind of started noticing. Taft was raised in a cult that was trying to bring back the Knights Radiant, and his family would say, hey, to trigger these abilities, you got to put yourselves in great danger. So his mother and father would have a rock above your head, a boulder on a fraying rope. That if you don't activate your powers, you'll be crushed to death by this rock, or burning at the stake, some really crazy stuff to try to bring back these Knight Radiant powers. As historical, the Heralds kind of gave up and they pieced out, and all the Knights Radiants gave up in an event called it wasn't the Hierarchy. There was a Ahordium. There was one day, one specific day, which all the Knights Radiants gave up forsake their oaths and kind of walked away, and they kind of quit. They betrayed their oaths and they stopped being Knight Radiants. And then everyone kind of views them as traitors. So they're really kind of like lost to history, and people think, oh, and then the church tried to make a power grab. And they said, oh, they're not real. It was illusions. They were never really had this power. Only God and the heralds, only the Almighty and the heralds have this power. So the people that believe in the Knights Radiants are these kind of like cultish people. It's kind of not as widespread anymore. But Teth was raised along these beliefs and what the heralds could do, or what the Knights Radiants could do. And he is seeing these signs in Kaladin. So he's like, hey, keep a spear with you on the storm. And Kaladin gets whipped and beaten. Syl, his spren, his honor spren, protects him the best she can. And Kaladin is like left for dead, and he barely survives. His crew is like, no, Kaladin can do anything. They go out and look for him, and he wakes up, but he's beat up. But it's a sign, like he was judged, so he can't be punished again. The Stormfather decided to spare him. And so they go take care of him. Teft gives him spears every day that he starts breathing in the stormlight to heal his body subconsciously. And when he wakes up as a son of a surgeon, he's like, I should be laid out for like 3 months, not better in like 2 weeks. So they're calling him Kaladin Stormblessed, which is awesome, which is a name that's persisted in him for a long time among multiple groups, which is very interesting. As he's kind of like had these different identities and been left for dead, the name persists. He had it in the army, he has it now in the bridge crew. So he decides, hey, they're going to keep running us until we get killed. Like, they hate us, and we're just going to they're going to get more and more difficult. So we have to leave. We can't. I thought I could protect you. I thought there's a way I can make, like with armor and shield, but they're not going to allow it. We're not meant to survive. We're bait. So we're going to escape. So they get transferred to permanent chasm duty, which is kind of the worst duties, that you're in these dark chasms. You're picking over for like salvage of all the armor and swords and weapons and spears that kind of get, and spears and spheres, the circular money spheres, and also stabby spear. They recover those, and they can be re-equipped in the army or and resold, whatever they want to do with them. But it's very dangerous because there's giant chasm fiends, these giant lobster monsters. They're huge. That live in the chasm fiends. And also, if you're trapped in a high storm, massive flooding, it's a box canyon, you'll drown. So they use that opportunity to do a little bit of looting and then train with the spear. So they have weapons that they hide down there, or they salvage different spears. And he's training his people to be spearmen and training them to be soldiers and fighters. And they're just going to like desert and run off. They don't know how they're going to do that. But it's also an opportunity for him to train with Stormlight, and he starts mastering the first surge, which again, I can't remember. Full lashing, when you just stick two things together. So he's sticking rocks to the wall, sticking Lopen to the wall, and he's practicing with surge binding. And then there's reverse surge, which he does with a shield to like pull arrows to him. So he's practicing with those things. They're finding ways to sneak money out of the chasms. Rock is very good with a bow. He has kind of a secret history as an archer. But he's like, no, now I'm third son, I'm not fourth son. I can't be a soldier. I'm a cook. And so they use the bow and rope to stick spheres they're stealing up to the size of bridges and reclaim them later. So they have another side hustle since they can't sell the antiseptic for money anymore. And so that's kind of going on for a little while. You get a sense of Sadeas being the worst. Then we're going to switch over to Shallan, because she's the most unconnected of these characters right now. Shallan is a Veden girl. She is the youngest daughter she has four older brothers. Yeah, four older brothers, and her father is the worst. We'll leave a lot of her backstory for the next book, but her father was just kind of very abusive, and not to hit her, but he would hit the brothers, and he would hit a lot of the staff. There's a lot of rumors in the family that he killed their mother one night in a fit of rage. And then he dies, and so they're now orphans. Her father had exchanged a lot of their allies with his like temper and his words and his actions, and they're in massive debt. And he had stolen or somehow acquired a soulcaster, which is a fabrial, like a glove that you wear, and uses gemstone power to transmute materials. And these are ancient artifacts that are very rare. They don't know how to make them anymore. They're made by the Knights Radiant, and they don't know how to recreate them, similar to shard blaze and shard plate. And he was using those to convert rock into like minerals that he could mine. So he's like, oh, I found a new iron mine, or I found a new copper mine. And he was actually soul casting rock, other materials into copper, and then mining it as a source of income to get himself out of debt. But when he died, his soulcaster broke, and so now the people who gave him the soulcaster, who are the Ghost Bloods, want the soulcaster back. They can't let everyone know that their father has passed away, and they have all this massive debt and no way to get all the money. So she comes up with this plan as being all the family's kind of broken. Shallan's very broken. One of her brothers is like a kind of a gambling addict. One of the brothers tortures animals. One of the brothers has been missing, is presumed dead. That he's been the successful older brother, has no one's heard of in like a year or two. So not a good sign there. And what's the other brother? One brother is kind of like a weakling and a little suicidal, and kind of depressed. So Shallan's been trying to save the family. You get a sense of like her making jokes and like trying to find distractions for them, and like, hey, my brother like tears apart bugs. Like he tries to encourage them to do other things and chase after this girl and like make himself better and not just be his own distractions. And the brother's like gambling and in massive debt. He starts trying to help out the family and help. And then the brother who's like doesn't think he's good at anything, kind of a weakling, she finds him like math problems, like, oh, you could be a storm warden and you have a really sharp mind. So she finds him like ways to apply himself. So she's really just kind of holding this family together, and she comes up with a crazy harebrained plan, which again, she's like 17, maybe 19, depending on how you count the years here. But she is going to get herself an apprenticeship to Jazza Kholin, the sister of the king of Alucard, and be a ward. But she's actually going to trade their broken soulcaster for Jazza's working one that they can use to, one, make a bunch of money and sell out their debts, and give it back to the people that want it, who are the Ghost Bloods, who are very upset with them for having it, or not returning it, or breaking it. All the above. So Jasna is a heretic, that she doesn't believe in the Almighty, and she has the soulcaster that are controlled by the church and controlled by Ardents, that they're not supposed to be having. And no one knows how she got it. So Shallan apprentices herself, and she travels chasing after this girl, Jasna, who agreed to be her mentor, but didn't really expect her to show up. So she kept hopping from city to city as she's doing her research. But Shallan finally impresses her and agrees to study underneath her, and she is loving it. She was very isolated. They only had a couple books. Her father kept scaring away her tutors, so now she's finally able to like learn and read and exposed to all this culture, all these books, trained under one of the smartest people alive in scholarship and mentorship, which is wonderful. And she's feeling very guilty as this lady's training her that she wants to steal from her. And one of the things that Jazna does is teach her philosophy, and Jazna is very brutally pragmatic, and she takes Shallan out one night to wearing a lot of jewelry, wearing a lot of gemstones, into a dark alley, and these thugs try to mug her, or worse, and she straight up murders them with her soulcaster. She turns them to like smoke and fire and crystal. And she's like, hey, am I right or wrong? It was self-defense, but I put myself in this position to incite their violence. But is that bad on me? It's like, that's still ultimately their choice and decision to engage in this violence. They've been enacting violence and mugging people for weeks and months, so I'm doing a greater good of getting these criminals out of the city and stopping their reign of terror. And Shallan's like, no, you murder people, and I'm out. So she goes to steal the Soulcaster and run away. But some crazy things are happening to her. She's drawing. She's a very good artist. Too good of an artist. I don't know what's going on with her memories, but it's awesome. She has a photographic memory. She has great skill at drawing. But she starts drawing these like puzzle-headed people, which are cryptic spren. As a type of spren, they're cryptics. And their heads are like fractal patterns, infinitely repeating little puzzles. And she starts running from them. She's seeing them in the corners of her vision. She's hearing their voices. So she thinks she's crazy. She accidentally transports herself into Shadesmar, which is the name here of the cognitive realm. There are 3 realms: spiritual, cognitive, and physical. We reside in the physical for the most part. And the spren mostly reside in the cognitive realm. So she kind of transports herself into the cognitive realm. Using Stormlight, she soulcast a pot into like water, blood. Anyway, it breaks. People come in. She can't explain all the blood. She can't explain all the broken stuff. So she pretends that she slit her wrist, and people then think like, "Oh, I broke my wrist on the glass." That's what she was trying to do, but it looks like she was like stressed too much and committed suicide, or tried to. And so she's got the stolen Soulcaster. She feels bad about it. She's thrown into the hospital. Jasna is like, hey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have like treated you so hard and run you so ragged. And one of the Ardents that has been like courting Shallan, and they're also slaves because the Vorin Church, the hierarchy, they try to like take control, and they were controlling access to like knowledge and theology and everything. And eventually, they got overthrown, and so they were no longer able to like hold government positions, and all the Ardents, all the educated, are basically owned by families of like slaves, but well-treated slaves, but they're owned and assigned, and they can't like marry or court or like hold a position in the family, which is wildly, and it sucks. It's so wild. But one of the Ardents was like trying to flirt with Shallan. He's like, I'll leave the Ardentia, like you're awesome, and he's bringing her all this jam and bread, and Jasna is saying like, no, he doesn't actually care about you. He's just using to get to me. This happens all the time. And Shallan's like, no, hey, he thinks I'm super cute. And he's bringing her bread and jam, like talking to her, but you can tell he's also like trying to convert Jasna into being returning to the church and not being a heretic. And he is very insistent for Jasna to try the jam that he's brought this time and the bread. And the jam tastes like terrible. Jasna's like, it smells bad. And then Shallan will eat the jam because she's like, no, it stinks. Like, I don't know what this, I never had strawberries before, but they must be awful. And then he's really insistent that Shallan eat the jam. And then he like chugs the bottle of jam. And then he runs out and dies in the hallway, and everyone's like, wait, what? And it turns out he was an assassin, and he was using the bread and the jam to try to poison Jasna. And then Shallan passes out, and Jasna has to soulcast her blood into like a pure blood and get all the poison out of it. But she's like, I need gemstones, I'm going to soulcast her blood. And then Shallan's like, oh, you can't, I stole your soulcaster. And she pulls it out of her safe pocket, and like, you need this to save my life. So the gig is up, and Shallan is saved, and she kind of wakes up, and she realizes what happened. And what happened was the poison was in the bread, and he had like some kind of dusting on the bread, and the antidote was in the jam because he heard that Jasna didn't like jam. So he was trying to get her to eat the bread, and then him and Shallan would eat the jam too and have the antidote. But Jasna, being clever and brutal, she thought the poison was in the jam, and she soulcast it by putting her finger in it. And that's why he couldn't have the antidote. He was chugging the jam, which tasted disgusting. She's bad inorganic stuff bad with organic stuff, and never tasted strawberries before, so didn't know how to make strawberry jam. So he poisoned himself with his own bread because he did a very heavy dose, and that's why he's trying to get Shallan to eat the jam as well. So he poisons both of them, and Shallan realizes that when she soulcast the jam, she was soulcasted without using her soulcaster because they hadn't made the swap yet. So Jazz is like, I put you on a boat tomorrow, you're gonna leave and just get out. You're no longer my ward. Like you lied to me, you try to steal from me. And then Shallan is like, in a moment of epiphany, like figures it out, like, oh no, you're a Radiant, you're having all these weird things too. You soulcasted without the gauntlet. She was wearing the gauntlet as a decoy so she could soulcast visibly in public without people knowing she had this ability, because Jasmine's super secretive and sneaky. Really love her. Very smart, very clever. And so Jasmine's like, well, okay, I'll take you as my ward. I still don't trust you, but you should have come to me. Like, all your problem is that you're like need money and status. Like, we'll have you we'll betroth you to my nephew, Adolin, who is like very eligible, but like, doesn't know how to maintain a relationship. He's just bouncing around. Like, we should, set him up, get him off the market. And then you're aligned to like the highest family in Alakar, so that'll give you position and status to ward off the predators, and you can still train under me, which is awesome. And she starts figuring out kind of Shallan's like, oh, she has a little cryptic spren that's following her around. I believe you start seeing pattern, the little spren. That's most of Shallan's journey. You also have there's a lot of secrets. The hints about with her having access to like a shard blade, and she has a lot of guilt over the death of her mother, so that is definitely addressed. And you also, what Jazz is researching is the Voidbringers. A lot of the records are kind of been altered or destroyed by the church, and like some of their cover-ups, or just to like remove mention of the Radiants that were like frauds, that they're actually parchment. So they have dumb-witted little slaves. They're just kind of like very passive, marble-skinned people, and they don't really respond. They're just kind of like used as a worker caste, actually above slaves because they're like obedient and strong. But these are the Voidbringers in lore that they were somehow able to like shift form and become these terrors. And the way they were described with their like skin color patterns is like what she's finding is, oh, we have to warn everyone that the humanity didn't defeat the Voidbringers, we enslaved them. Like, we don't throw away a tool. So somehow we are to turn the Voidbringers into like a workforce, and we use them as slave labor, but they're all around us, and there's like millions of them in all parts of our society. Even if they do nothing worse than like quitting being slaves, it will destroy the world through economic collapse. So that's one of the big things from Shallan's chapters. They're trying to find the lost city of Urithiru. They want to investigate the Shattered Plains, that there was more there. If not the city itself, a way to travel to the city, or weapons, letters, books, notes that weren't destroyed in the hierarchy, that weren't destroyed or edited by the church, kind of raw notes. Because the Parshendi, which are very similar to Parshmen, except warlike and intelligent and better armored and stronger, that they are living out there, and they have worked iron and weapons, and so they didn't make these things because other parts of their culture don't suggest it, that they actually are scavenging a lot of these tools and shards from the old city out in the Shattered Plains. So they're going to travel out there to meet up, and at the Shattered Plains is the other main character, Dalinar Kholin. He is the brother to Gavilar, who was killed by Sazeth in the beginning. He was drunk in his cups during the night of his brother's death, and he felt very guilty. And his brother, in his dying words, through Sazeth, wrote, "Find the most important words a man can say." And so he took that to reading The Way of Kings, a book within a book, which was a book about how to like be a leader, of how to lead people, written thousands of years ago by one of the greater kings. And it has a lot of like ideals and philosophy. And so Dalinar is having this book read to him because reading yourself is not manly. Stabbing people with swords is manly. Reading is feminine. So he has like the scribes and the women like read this book to him again and again. He's trying to embody these traits to live up to it, the ideal of his brother, as a way of like making amends for not being there to protect him, for being drunk. So he's like, hey, like during war times, like don't overdrink, like be prepared. Don't duel and fight and injure yourselves or other soldiers. Keep your uniform like up and clean. Follow these codes. So he's trying to follow these codes and ideals because that's what his brother wanted as his kind of dying wish. And he is becoming a better man. In his youth, he was, a warlord, a murderer, just like a very brutal, savage soldier. And now he is trying to be a better person. But everyone around him is saying, no, you lost your edge. You used to be the Blackthorn. You used to be like the best of us. And now you don't even want to go on these like plateau runs. They're here to fight this war to defeat the Parshendi. But all the other war camps, they found a way to get money out of it. They have these great shells, the Chazapines. They pupate on the plateaus and they're like hibernating. And you can run up and smash open their shell and grab their gem heart. Inside they have a heart made out of gems. It's giant, massive gemstone. And so they're getting rich out here. So they're now competing and they're racing the Parshendi to these gem hearts. And Dalinar's like, what are we doing? So he is actually running the kingdom in effect. So he is patrolling and he is patrolling for bandits and patrolling the marketplaces. And he is kind of running the government. While all the other high lords are competing for money. Sadeas, being very brutal and very callous, is kind of getting the most wealth. And the actual ruler is his nephew, Elhokar, who does not know how to rule, and he's a very weak king. Dalinar is kind of ruling in effect. He has two sons, Adolin, who is just a spitting image of him. He's a great soldier. He also has sharp plate and blade. And he's a great duelist. And his other son that, I'm forgetting his name, which is very sad because Renarin. Renarin, who has like kind of a medical condition. He gets the shakes. He kind of freezes up. So he's not a soldier. And everyone's like, all the other three are soldiers. Your dad's a great soldier. So he feels like a disappointment. But he's a very smart kid. He's a sweet kid. The brothers are great to each other. They're fantastic brother synergy there. So they're both really good kids. I like them both a lot. They're both better than Dalinar, which is what he wants. So Dalinar has started getting visions during the high storms. And these are visions given by the Almighty of things that happened long ago, of the desecrations, of the Voidbringers. And he's like, you have to unite them. So the visions, that's part of the reason people think Dalinar's gone crazy, is because he's like sieging out during the high storms, and then he's blathering about in other languages, and he's talking about the things he sees in these visions. And people are like, you're old and you're crazy. You're a crazy old man. But he's acting on these visions, and which is very troublesome. So this is getting long, so I'm going to go faster. I'm sorry, because Dalinar's chapters are amazing. But he's saying, hey, we can't be fighting over gemstones. We have to end this war. We have to unite. We have to be one army. We have to be one nation. So he gets himself anointed as High Lord of War. And he starts trying to like get the other high princes to join assaults with him. And he wants to put all his armies to work together. Like, I have a better heavy infantry. You have a better cavalry. You have better bridge crews. You have better supplies and mercantile. So like, let's all team up and take the fight to the middle of the plains, do a prolonged siege through high storms. Let's actually go out for like 2 weeks, or like during the weeping, and let's go out and smash these people up and actually end the war once and for all. But no one else trusts him because the Alethi are all kind of like violent backstabbers, and they all think, oh, you're going to use this opportunity to one up on me, that this is all a trap. So he goes on a bunch of runs by himself with his son. They have Shard Plate and Blade. Shard Blade is a magic sword that can cut through any material that is non-organic instantly. So rock, metal, swords, wood, spears, anything else. It just shears them off. But flesh, it goes through invisibly, but it severs kind of the soul. It cuts off like the nerves, and that it cuts off your arm. That arm kind of shrivels and turns gray. You can't move it. If it cuts through your vertebrae, your eyes burn out and you die. It kind of severs the soul from your body. So brutal weapons. You can just mow people down like you're cutting down grass. So he has a set of plate and blade, and his son does as well. And they go out on these joint assaults with Sadeas. And Sadeas gets overwhelmed, and Dalinar cuts through him. It's the old Blackstorm again. He gets into the thrill. He starts mowing down. He's protecting, and him and Adolin are back to back, and they are just everyone's like, oh, wounded shard bearers, and they start throwing themselves, all the Parshendi, with hammers and rocks and their bodies and ropes to try to like bear them down. And they just massacre these people, and it's just like to protect this life. He fights like he's never fought in years. And he saves Sadeas, and they're going through all this. And then Sadeas agrees to do like a joint run with him. And they go out on this big run at the tower, and this massive armies. And Sadeas pulls back, and he's like, "Oh, haha, I got you," because he's like, "Oh, you're my old friend." Well, he's a power move, like, "Hey, I can take your place," and like you don't have your edge anymore. You're getting saw. For the greater good, this kingdom needs a better ruler. So he redraws with all his bridge crews because he got Dalinar to use his faster bridge crews. Dalinar, not throwing away people's lives, is using like reinforced bridges that are mechanical. That are moved by Chols, which are like bison but with shells. They're just like giant like slug crabs that can withdraw into their shells, and they can't be hit by arrows because they're basically giant crab monsters. Giant slug monsters. So they're getting, and then they mechanically like lower and extend using gears and then reinforce. They're super heavy and complicated. So Dalinar brings his better soldiers. They use Sadeas' bridges, but Sadeas now controls all the bridges. He lures Dalinar into a trap and leaves them isolated out there. Kaladin, being in his bridge crew, sees that. It's like, no, I don't want to leave those people to die. Like, I should protect people. So they hang back, and they double back and take a bridge crew to save and rescue Dalinar. His bridgemen that he's been trained to fight with the spear are ready to hold the bridge crew. Kaladin swears the second ideal of the Knights Radiant, of the Windrunners. The first oath being always the same for all orders. Life before death, journey before destination, strength before weakness. I might mix up the order, but all the words are there. His second oath is like, I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. And so Syl swirls around him. He's able to like soak in a bunch of stormlight, and he's a little more efficient from him. During this run, he used stormlight to like pull arrows to his shield. He jumps out over the bridge with stormlight, and he is laying out with his spear. He's breathing stormlight from the Parshendi that has gemstones in their beards. And they have their own legends and lore that's kind of lost to mankind. So like they recognize him for what he is. So some of them run away from him. He's able to get replacement spears from his crew, his support crew. So they hold the bridges. They start getting a place for Dalinar to retreat, and he kind of rushes through to save Dalinar and Adolin. He is able to rush to Dalinar, who's in a one-person duel with the only Parshendi Shardbearer Eshonai. And he like kind of stabs her in the back of the leg through, again, a shard bearer and shard blade. He finds the cracks. This is like the third time he's done it. He knows how to do this now. He rescues Dalinar, gets him out of there. Sadeas gets back to camp, and he's like, oh no, we were surrounded. I barely escaped. Dalinar was trapped out there. Oh no, poor guy. And then here comes Dalinar, wounded and pissed. He lost like 5,000 men. He only has like 2,000 soldiers left. He comes back, and everyone thinks they're gonna fight, and he's like, "Hey, I'm taking your bridgemen because they saved Dalinar. They betrayed Sadeas, and they're gonna be like executed." And Thaddeus is like, "No, they're not for sale." And he's like, "I'll give them like 3 times what they're worth. If you're doing 10 spears ahead, I'll pay 30. And Sadeas is like, no, I'm going to execute them all because they're my property. You can have them. And Dalinar offers his priceless sword, Oathbringer, his shard blade. Sadeas has shard plate. He doesn't have a blade. So Dalinar gives up his sword, which, again, these are relics. No one knows how to make these. These are all thousands of years old. They are priceless relics. And he gives it up. And Sadeas has thirsted for this his whole life. So the Blackthorn gives up his shard blade, his priceless magic relic heirloom, stabs it into the ground. Everyone thinks he's gonna murder Sadeas. He summons a sword, stabs it into the ground. One sword for all the lives, and Sadeas takes it. So all the bridgemen are rescued. They're all saved by Dalinar. They're taken to Dalinar's camp, and Kaladin is like, that sword is priceless. Like, I can't believe you gave that up for us. And he's like, how much is a human life worth? Also priceless. And I got 10,000 lives for one sword. That's a pretty good deal, which is one of the best lines in the book. Oh, Dalinar is so good. And Dalinar is like, enough. So he goes to his nephew, and his nephew's like, his father's assassinated. He's kind of a coward. He's afraid he's gonna be assassinated. He's like, Dalinar, what's all this? You gotta learn to play well with Sadeas, and I'm worried about assassins, and what are you even doing? You act like you're ruling around here, and you're not really protecting me. Maybe you want to have me actually to die. He's a whiny little jerk. And Dalinar tells his men, don't let anyone in, don't come in, no matter what you hear. And he lays the king out. The king has a shard blade, and I think he's wearing plate. And Dalinar, in wounded plate, with no blade, lays him down and crushes pummels his armor till it shatters, and just has his hand on his throat. And the guards, he's screaming at the guards, and the guards aren't coming. He's like, these are my men. These are my guards. I told them not to come in, and they won't. And they're not, even though you're yelling for help, because they answer to me. I could have you dead anytime I wanted. My guards wouldn't even bat their eye. You're a weak king. I'm awesome. I'm the Blackthorn. Everyone knows I could rule this kingdom if I wanted to. I want you to rule, because that's what, out of respect to your father. But I'm not going to stab you in the back. I'm not hiring assassins. I could take you out with my bare hands on the Blackthorn. That's what I would do, like I did right now. If I wanted to kill you, I'd do it. I don't want to kill you, so stop not trusting me. Put this behind us. I'm going to be High Prince of War. We're going to end this thing. We're not going to trust Sadeas. He just lays out the rules, and it's awesome. Throughout the book, there's been assassination attempts, and we find out Elhokar planned one of them himself. That way, see who he could trust, or to get other people to take him seriously about his other suspected assassination attempts. That's been part of the whole power plays back and forth. So that is the primary arcs. Kaladin is rescued out of the bridge crews. He's kind of aligned with Dalinar. Dalinar puts him in charge of his guard, saying, hey, you don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to go to war, but just protect me. And that is in line with his oaths of protecting those who can't protect himself. He's going to guard the king. So that way, all the bridgemen become guards, and all the old guards can go back to being soldiers since their forces were depleted. There are interludes in this. You have a lot of wit perspective. Wit is the king's wit. He is hired to make fun of people, but he's a very smart guy. You will definitely see more of him. He kind of pops up, and he kind of inspires Kaladin. He's a storyteller, so he kind of gives people what they need to hear to encourage them. And at the end of the book, you see Wit outside a gate in Elhokar, playing his flute and annoying people, which he's very good at both. And someone's beating on the gate, and the guards won't let him in. And then you see a sharp blade cut the gate lock in half, and the gate swings open, and it's Town, the herald, and he is ragged. He's dragging a giant sharp blade shaped like a point, and he is saying, "Oh, the desolation is upon us. I may be too late. Town has allegedly broken after 4 millennia. He has returned to warn people, but he thinks he's way too late. The desolations, the Voidbringers are returning." And then he kind of just passes out, and Wit's there to kind of gather him and the Shard Blade, potentially the Honor Blade. And that is the very end of the book. That is the end note. Let me double check the epilogue. Yeah, it's the epilogue. Yep. So I'm going to cut it there. Obviously, there's a lot more to these books, but I think that gets us the big pieces. Thank you for watching. I'll try to get more cat in the next video. My setup is not very good right now, so I don't have cat cam up. But thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. These are massive books, so I definitely glossed over a bunch. But soon, the Words of Radiance. Thanks for watching, buddy.